Jesus' words in today's gospel are both strange and familiar. We hear the words, "This is my body and this is my blood," every time we celebrate the Eucharist. But when we actually hear Jesus say, "Eat my flesh and drink my blood," the strangeness of what we do in the Eucharist hits us in the face. How do we even wrap our minds around something so weird? How do we understand and visualize how the Eucharist connects us to Jesus? After all, cannibalism is a universal human taboo. The only images we have in pop culture are vampire movies and zombie TV shows. These are not appealing images. Luckily, we don't have to go only to the realm of horror fiction to envision how one person's flesh and blood can give life to another. We can go to the realm of biology, and specifically to pregnancy. As more and more of my friends and family experience pregnancy, I'm struck by how similar it is to what Jesus speaks about in today's gospel. Pregnancy is ordinary, it's how every one of us arrived on this planet, and yet the more you think about it, the stranger and more miraculous it is. Hearts and limbs and eyes and brains and people just grow. More than one pregnant friend has commented on feeling both thrilled and unsettled by the kicking and moving of her child. A breastfeeding mom commented that she's often amazed that she can feed her child without even thinking about it. Witnessing this ordinary strangeness has led me to think in new ways about what Jesus does in giving his body and blood for us and how we can be Christ's body and blood for each other. First, seeing my pregnant friends and their new babies has reminded me of how necessary the Eucharist is for our survival. No one can exist without first being nourished by the body and blood of their mother. Unless we're nourished by her body, we cannot have life. Likewise, the body and blood of Christ is necessary for our spiritual life. It's not an add-on, but the core. Without it, we cannot have life within us. Second, thinking about the Eucharist side by side with pregnancy has given me an image of how it helps us grow in closeness to Jesus. Jesus tells us, "Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me and I in him." Scientists have discovered that cells from a baby remain inside a mother's body for decades, in her blood and in her body, including her brain. The mother and child literally and physically remain in each other. So too with the Eucharist, we remain in Jesus as he remains in and nourishes us. Finally, contemplating pregnancy and the Eucharist together reminds me that participating in the body and blood of Christ, as St. Paul mentions in the first reading, is demanding, even as it is a gift. The pregnant women I have known have all been fortunate to experience their pregnancies and their children as sources of joy. Even so, I've been surprised by the ways their bodies are affected. They mention aches and pains from weight, sciatica, exhaustion, and the inability to sleep because of the discomfort of how they're carrying their child. And all of these things are in healthy pregnancies with no complications. Jesus gives us his body and blood, but it did not come without sacrifice. And as we participate in his body and blood, as St. Augustine says, as we become what we receive, we cannot do so without some cost to ourselves. This challenge is daunting. But the first reading about God providing manna in the desert is a reminder that even in our afflictions and our sacrifices, we're never outside of God's care and tenderness and protection. So, let us pray that we don't keep ourselves away from that life and nourishment of the Eucharist, that we pay attention to the ways that the Eucharist causes us to grow in closeness with Jesus, and that we trust in God's tender compassion when we are called to follow in Jesus' example and sacrifice for others.